What is up, fellow orcs? It's another week, another video. This time, I want to focus on the Stompa. Let's talk about the new Orc Stompa in 11th edition. Want to start off by going over some general strengths and weaknesses. I have about 4 games deep on the Stompa at this point in 11th edition, and some general things that I found about the Stompa at 600 points. Some of the best shooting in our entire roster. I don't think anything else shoots as hard. High toughness. I don't know many other things that are T14 in the game right now. Pretty good. It's hard for them to do damage to it. It's also a transport. It has transport capacity. So not only is the thing a deadly weapon in itself, it can deliver deadly things also. OC, very high OC. Thing is really good at holding points. And it provides a leadership buff. We're not a very high leadership army. And the way leadership tests work now, I think getting that +1 is good. Some negatives, though, the weaknesses. So up to you. Decide if these are worth the strengths. Hard to move. It does have 10-inch move, but new layouts make it difficult to move this thing around the board. You can move block yourself if you put guys in the wrong place. There's really only one detachment that really benefits this thing. Dread Mob is about it. It's also very command point hungry. It's a useful platform, but I think as orcs, because our shooting itself is not that reliable, you're going to find yourself spending a lot of CP on this thing to make it do the things you need it to do, especially because you're locked to perch a foe with Dread Mob. It's an easy target. It's a massive model. Very easy to shoot. If you move it up the board at all, your opponents are going to be able to shoot it. They'll get a -1, but the Stompa only has a 6-up invuln, right, with a 4-up base save. So AP3, AP4, which a lot of the anti-vehicle shooting has, is going to put you on 5s and 6s. And I'm going to say this now. At 600 points, the Stompa is still overcosted. This is my opinion. Argue about that in the comments below. And like and subscribe, too. I'm going to be putting out a lot more orc content in the next, over the whole edition. We got a codex coming soon, so I'm sure I'm going to have a lot to talk about. Now, let's get into the datasheet itself. Some information about the Stompa. I'm going to start by going over the base stats. So you've got 10-inch move, your T14. You have a 2-up base save, which is really good. 6-up invuln. 30 wounds. This is where the Stompa shines. Leadership 6+, which is, not that great, even, I guess, for a massive centerpiece model. And OC12. OC12 is huge. So just if you were to just look at the stat line alone, this thing is great at just sitting on an objective, right? Because you got 30 wounds. It's hard to kill. T14, they're not going to wound it very well unless they have anti. We'll get into that. Decent save characteristic. And OC12 is good. They're going to need 7 units at OC2 in order to surpass you. So pretty good if you just hold it on an objective. Starting with the important stuff. So if you want to look on the right side of the screen, I have the weapons. Now, I did not list every shooting weapon because every other shooting weapon that the Stompa has is pretty generic orc stuff, right? Like Big Shooter, rocket launcher, Scorcha, like basic flamethrower. But these are the 3 main guns. So you've got the Def Cannon, which is like your main anti-vehicle, 72-inch range. So if you can see it, you can shoot it. Assuming that the opponent is not using hidden or they don't get cover or go to ground, whatever. 3d6, so can be a little swingy, but that's still, if you roll hot, that's a lot of shots, right? But on average, I think you're probably going to have somewhere between 10 shots, right? I think 10 to, if you're lucky, 12 shots plus. It does have blast, and your strength 14, so you're going to wound most of the game on 2s and 3s. Very few things are going to be able to make you wound worse. AP3 is good, so you're going to consistently push to people's invulns, or if a vehicle doesn't have an invuln, they might not even get a save on some vehicles, right? If they have a 4-up base save, or or putting on sixes if they're a 3-up base save. D6 damage, so again, a little swingy, right? You've got swinginess into the number of shots and swinginess into the damage. The Super Gatler. This might be my favorite weapon. This is like the anti-infantry, I'll say, weapon. So you've got 24-inch range, so you already have to be pretty close to use it. It's about half the board still, though, right? 24-inch range, 20 shots base. So that's no joke. 20 shots base with sustained hits. So 20 shots, sustained hits. You hit on 5s base. Strength 7, AP 1, damage 2. So great at killing like Space Marines. And you're going to see a lot of them right now. So I think Super Gatler's great. That's probably the main weapon, the most consistent weapon, especially because it already has sustained. The Super Rockets. So I think these are your secondary anti-vehicle shooting. Usually when I'm shooting at a vehicle, I'm going to use the def cannon and the rockets. I'm rarely going to split fire on these. I would probably put both of these weapons, the def cannon and the super rocket, into the same target, and then Super Gatler is going to try to shoot some infantry. D6 shots, so a little swingy again. Strength 12, AP 3, D6 plus 2. That's no joke. The D6 plus 2 is crazy. If you get a couple of these through, D6 plus 2, you could eliminate, a dreadnought in one shot, one activation, a lot of transports, a lot of other vehicles. So very strong. The melee weapons. You have the Mega Choppa. Now this thing goes crazy if you can get into melee. 6 attacks on a 3-up, strength 24, minus 5 AP, 10 damage. Kind of overkill. I'll be honest, most of the time I think I'm just using the sweep, because 18 attacks on a 3-up at strength 10, AP 2, damage 3, it's really good. I'm rarely gonna pass that up. Especially if you do your button press for sustained or lethal is great on that profile. And we'll get into other combos that can make that melee profile even better. Some other rules to know: deadly demise 2d6. So if it does die and it does blow up, you can do a lot of damage. Unfortunately, also to yourself. I will never forget. This was like halfway through 10th. I went to a tournament, and this was when Sisters had their OP move up advance and shoot you with a million meltas. And I remember somebody losing their Stompa and it exploding on their line and killing half their army. So something to be aware of, right? Like, I think you want to protect the Stompa, but I would not keep too many units around it. Maybe just a couple of things to screen for it. Some other things on its data sheet that are important: +1 to battle shocks for orc units in 12 inches. I think this rule is really good, especially with the new combat disembark. So if you get the Stompa into melee, you can have your guys disembark into melee. And we'll talk later about this as well. But because you combat disembark, you are battle shocked. So if you combat disembark into something and they live, the next turn, it should be easy for them to unbattle shock if the Stompa is still alive, hopefully, with whatever they're in combat with. And for that reason, transport 22, something important to think about. That's a lot of space. You can fit a lot of orcs inside a Stompa, or a lot of Gretchen. Something to think about. What is the Stompa doing well? The Stompa, in terms of strengths, you have a great midboard threat. Nobody wants to get close to this thing without shooting it, right? Like, I think shooting armies want to get close because they're probably just going to melt the crap out of it. But otherwise, great midboard threat, right? Solid melee, solid shooting. It's really good at holding your expansion or your home objective. Um, we'll talk later about moving down the board, but it has consistent damage with 4 asterisks. Why 4 asterisks? Because it's consistent, but it's also swingy. Like, it's hard to describe. Like, with the stratagems, it makes it more consistent. And if you pick the right button press at the right time, you can be consistent, but it requires a lot of thought, right? I'm not just going to step in and the Stompa isn't just going to kill everything. You have to do a little work to make sure it does. So that's why I put 4 asterisks. I think it is consistent damage, but you have to really plan your game around it, especially if you're playing Purge the Foe. It is the best Dread Mob unit, I think, hands down. Nothing else in Dread Mob is going to kill 2 to 3 units every activation. So it's really useful for Purge the Foe, because your opponent's not going to kill it usually, most of the time. So best shooting unit in Dread Mob, hands down, best unit, best use of the strats. And I think it's also really good at delivering grots and infantry up the board. So if you want to OC bomb something, right? I'm going to move my Stompa up 10 inches. Maybe I'm going to advance and shoot. The Stompa dies. Guess what? Now you have to deal with 22 Gretchen. I just flip the objective, or I move my Stompa up, disembark all my grots after moving, and now I have 20 plus OC on the point, and my Stompa is safely behind the terrain. So a couple of different strategies to think of there. And take this with a grain of salt, because you're not going to pull it off all the time. Sorry, I need a little water. But if you use plunging fire, if you're within 12 inches, you are going to improve your ballistic skill by 1 because you're towering. So now you're hitting on 4s. The mech, when he buffs the Stompa, gives you +1 to hit. So all of a sudden, you're shooting things on a 3-up without cover. I think that's crazy. Like, if you told me that Orks had a way to hit things on 3s, I would tell you you're nuts. But I've done it. It's not game breaking. If you think I'm doing this wrong, if you think these rules interactions don't work, tell me in the comments below. But as far as I'm aware, towering gives you +1 ballistic skill, and the mech gives you +1 to hit. So those can absolutely stack. If you're modifying the hit roll, that's different. If you're modifying the ballistic skill, that's different. But even if somebody has cover, all of a sudden you're hitting on 4s. Much different story for the Stompa. Much more consistent damage that way. So let's talk about things that the Stompa upsets me about. How does the Stompa upset me? How does it let me down? 1, this is the hardest model in the game to move probably right now. It is about 9 inches in diameter. So good luck moving that. There's so much terrain on the board now, and you can't end on top of terrain. So you can tow into stuff fairly easily, but navigating the board otherwise kind of difficult. I also learned in the last game I played against Custodes that if you put 20 boys with 2 characters inside of a Stompa, it is actually, there is no legal move to disembark those units. Because of how large the Stompa is and the new disembark rules where you have to be as close to the unit or the transport that you're disembarking from, it's actually impossible to keep 20 boys in coherency while disembarking. And if you can't do the disembark and be in coherency, you can't make the move. So don't put 20 boys inside of the Stompa. Maybe try 2 10-man units, or I think 20 grots you can get away with it because they're so small. But I would stick to smaller units if you're going to put stuff inside the Stompa. There's a lot of LOS blocking terrain. Harder for the Stompa to shoot things. Although you can just tow in, which is nice, there is just more LOS blocking terrain. So sometimes your opponent can kind of prevent you from taking targets, which kind of sucks on Purge if you need to get that kill to score points. On that note, too, the Stompa is easier to kill than you would think. 30 wounds is a lot. Certainly a lot of wounds. I don't know many models in the game that have that much wounds. But also, there's a lot of d6 damage. There's a lot of dev wounds in the game. There's a lot of anti vehicle stuff running around. So it's not as tanky as you would think. And also like +1 to hit and wound against monster vehicle, right? I think there's ways for people to kill it, and if they just take the time to figure that out, I think they're going to counter you pretty well, because if you lose a Stompa, you lose the game. Is what I've learned, right? Like I think if your Stompa dies, that was 600 points. You're going to have a hard time killing stuff after that. So we'll talk about that at the end of the video. I have like a list prepared for you. So if you're thinking about using the Stompa, I can sort of show you how I would go about doing it. In case you were to lose it, you could still kill stuff. I would say at 600 points, the Stompa is still overcosted. I love to compare the Stompa to the Defiler, because people are whining about the Defiler being more expensive, but the Defiler is just a better Stompa. I mean, I don't know if that's a fair comparison to make, but the Defiler has as many guns. It's also really good in melee. It can move through walls, and the Stompa can't. The Stompa does not have super heavy walker, so you cannot move through terrain, but a Defiler can. That's on its datasheet. So, I don't know. In my opinion, I think the Stompa could be 400 points and probably still be fine. If it still had the stepper, I guess. Like, you'd probably still need the stepper, but I think the Stompa could be 400 or 500 points, and then it would be okay. I think at 600, it's still overcosted, in my opinion. There's also only one viable detachment for it. I don't know why you would take it in any other detachment other than funny. Haha. I would take other stuff. Personally, 600 is a lot to put into one unit. And if you're not playing, like maybe in Freebooter Crew, I could see this being okay, maybe, because you could just sit it on an objective to give yourself sustained all the time. But the Super Gatler has sustained. So, I don't know. I'd rather just go Dreadmob, personally. So here's some combos. Here's some strategies, things to think about. I already talked about the hitting on threes, right? So always bring a mech if you're going to bring the Stompa. Have the mech tag the Stompa, plunging fire, you're hitting on threes, right? Dividends. That's solid. I like the Daka strat. In Dreadmob on here, you go full reroll to hit, you take the hazardous. I'll just roll for my button press. Unfortunately, sometimes you will hit the extra AP on crit wounds, but some armies, that's good. Sometimes I like the crit wounds if they don't have invulns, but if they have invulns, I don't know, you might not want to use this strat, because I don't know about going double hazardous on the Stompa, right? Like taking 9 wounds on the Stompa from yourself and getting like 2 kills, not really advantageous. Bigger shells for bigger gets, helps you with vehicle kills, +1 to wound on a strength 14 weapon if they have minus to wound or something. I don't know, I'm wounding vehicles on 2s. That's great. I would love to wound dreadnoughts and vehicles and Primarchs on 2s. What's great about the Stompa, and I think its biggest utility, is that in Dreadmob, you can layer stratagem use on this model. And if you're in Dreadmob, you're going to be running a lot of Gretchen, so you're probably consistently getting your 3 CP every battle round. So on those turns you need to go and you need to kill stuff with the Stompa, you can use Super Fueled Boiler in the movement phase. So advance your Stompa. Then in the shooting phase, you can use bigger shells for bigger gets if you need to kill a vehicle or monster, or you can use Daka if you think you need the rerolls because they have cover or some other stacking buffs that keep you from doing as much damage. But that's 2 CP so far, but we can layer it, So I've talked about movement phase, then the shooting phase, then in the fight phase, you could use Clank and Claws. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's no stipulation about the Stompa using this strat. So all of a sudden, if you take your hazardous, right, you're gonna take this weapon to hazardous, but if you do the sweep, you've got 18 attacks hitting on threes, strength 12, damage 4. That is crazy. If anybody has Terminators or something, you can just sweep, blow them all up. Easy stuff. So something to think about. Layer your strats. That's one of the best things about the Stompa, is that it can benefit from being your centerpiece model, right? Like if I'm bringing a Stompa, I'm going to use all my command points on it so I can plan out what strats I'm going to be using and what phases on it, because you can still use a lot of stratagems on it, even with the new changes, so that I can't use 2 in one phase. Like I said before, I like disembarking Gretchen out of the Stompa. If you put 2 10-man units in it, turn 1, move up to your expansion, dump out 10 grots, then you're rolling for more CP, and that's an OC bomb. Then next turn, your Stompa moves over to the center, drop out another 10 grots. Your opponent, if they're playing take and hold or something, is going to have a hard time keeping up with your ability to take these objectives and secure them with grots with that huge OC strat. And then if they want to kill grots instead of killing your Stompa, I'm all for that. Please shoot my goblins so that my giant tank with a face can just shoot your whole army. Target priority is key. Don't split fire more than 2 units when you shoot with the Stompa. If you shoot more than 2 units, you are not going to kill more than 2 units. The Stompa is strong, but not that strong. If I'm going to shoot multiple targets, chances are something's going to live. Sometimes I'll even shoot all of the guns at one target if I know I need to kill it. So don't get overzealous just because these weapons have crazy damage profiles. Don't bank on them doing all that damage when you hit on 5s base, right? Don't don't think that this thing's better than it is, because it's strong. Don't get me wrong. I think it's better at 600 points, but it's not going to win you the game automatically. You have to keep it alive. You have to strategize around it. Make sure that you have a bubble of protection. Other shooting units, Gretchen, boys, something to keep your opponent from getting in close or shooting it from a mile away, right? Have something that can trade. So let's talk about a list. This is something I ran the other day. It's kind of fun. I like pairing Dread Mob with more Daka because, I don't know, like Orks shooting. Why not? And now that we can take more Daka with Dread Mob, I think it makes the mech units a lot better too. And the mechs are really good at supporting the Stompa and keeping smaller threats from getting too close, or your opponent from getting overzealous and standing out in the middle of the open and thinking they're safe. So I've got a war boss and a big mech with smoky gubbins with 20 boys, so that's hard to remove. It keeps the Stompa safe. If you have cover and smoky gubbins, you are now -1 to hit, and they get -1 ballistic skill. So -2 to hit boys is pretty good, in my opinion. Zodgrod with 22 grots. This might be the best combo for Zodgrod, because you could advance and shoot his unit on turn 1 after you've scouted up 9, and they can do some damage. I'm not relying on it, but they can. It's possible. Plus, you have the reactive move in Dread Mob with Gretchen, so he's a good guy to choose. 2 smaller units of grots. Like I said, you could put 1 in the Stompa or just 1 behind Zodgrod for when he moves up. And then 1 on your home, obviously. Big mech with shock attack gun. I have 2 of those attached to 2 units of Ludas with the dead shiny shooters. That's a lot of Daka, right? You're gonna have like 4, I believe it's 4 shots each. If you're within I mean, what, they have like 48-inch range on the def guns, and then the Big Mech with shock attack gun is 60 inches, right? So anything within 24 inches is just going to get shot to death, hopefully, right? Especially if you've got full rerolls, if they're on an objective. I like Ludas just because it's like an extra damage buff inside of Dread Mob, just for, like, I don't know, like, just shooting is good, right? And if you've got 40 shots coming out of that unit with full reroll to hit because they're on an objective, I love that. It means I can use Daka 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 on my Stompa and not feel bad about it. Big Mech with shock attack gun with Git Finder goggles. This is the ignores cover strat with the tank busta, or enhancement, sorry. Tank bustas with ignores cover are gonna true hit vehicles and monsters on 4+. This is a need to take. I'm not taking tank bustas without the ignores cover strat enhancement and the pulsar rockets. So he takes the Big Mech, they take the Big Mech to bigger heights, because then he's hitting on 4s and then probably wounding vehicles on 4s or 3s even. Pretty strong. I like this unit. Kills a lot of stuff. One mech boy, because you gotta bring a mech if you bring the Stompa, just for the +1 to hit and the lone op. He can do actions. You know, I would just always take this, and he can heal back some of the damage you do to yourself if you fail a hazardous. And you definitely want to keep your Stompa above 10 wounds so that you don't take the -1 to your shooting. And 2 Big Mech Daka rigs. I like these units. I think people are overhyping them. Are they undercosted at 100 points? Yeah, probably. But even if they went up like 10 points, I would probably still take 1, maybe 2, just because it's our like first reliable anti-infantry shooting option outside of like Ludas or something. Like, they're pretty, I think the Big Mech Daka rig is very comparable to the Ludas. But this is a video about the Stompa, so of course the Stompa's in here too. Well, not so much a meme list. I think this list has some potential. I don't love the Stompa still. Like I said, it's fun. I'm definitely enjoying the games I bring it now, because it feels like I didn't just waste 800 points, right? Because the 200 points I gained gives me the 2 Big Mech Daka rigs here. So it's a big deal. Even if it's not the best, I think dropping 200 points really opens up lists with the Stompa around it. So hopefully this was useful for you. Hopefully you learned something about the Stompa. Maybe you'll take yours out and you'll hit the field. If you do, put something down in the comments. Tell me how it went. If you are running 2 or 3 Stompas, tell me how that went too. I don't own more than 1 Stompa, but I'd love to see it. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching, and remember, whoa!